And now to an extraordinarily brazen new threat from North Korea. This is quite a story, alerting its strategic rocket forces, which it says are assigned to strike American bases in Guam, Hawaii, and even the U.S. mainland. Let's go straight to our Pentagon correspondent, Chris Lawrence, for more on this. Chris, just yesterday, you and I were talking about this new defense pact between the U.S. and South Korea in order to defer further provocation and provocative threats from North Korea. What are you learning today?
Yeah, and Kate, here comes this latest escalation, and it's one that Pentagon officials are telling us they are taking very seriously. They're worried that this could lead to the kind of provocations that could, quote, take us to a place that neither side wants to go.
North Korea declared itself combat ready. Pyongyang went beyond threats Tuesday and put its rocket and long-range artillery forces at their highest combat alert.
The DPRK will achieve nothing by these threats or provocations.
North Korea's military alert comes at a sensitive time, the 3-year anniversary of the Cheonan sinking. South Korea says the North torpedoed its ship and killed 46 sailors. North Korea directly threatened U.S. military bases in Hawaii, the mainland, and Guam. It doesn't have the capability to hit the U.S., but tens of thousands of American troops are in range, deployed to bases in South Korea, Japan, the Philippines, and Guam.
The U.S. is fully capable of defending itself and our allies against the DPRK attack.
But those artillery units do pose a direct threat to South Korea's capital.
And would be able to wreak enormous damage through its long-range artillery on Seoul itself that would result in early and immediate loss of, tens of thousands of lives, if not more.
Analyst Scott Snyder is just back from South Korea. He says officials are trying to determine if these threats are indications of real insecurity in the regime or Kim Jong-un's way of asserting his authority.
We don't really know the internal situation in terms of what he might have to do or who he might have to owe in terms of the ability to sustain power.
In fact, U.S. officials tell us that it is extremely difficult to get human intelligence on the inner workings of the regime. They're not as worried about the big grand scale attack, but they are worried about smaller provocations like shelling some of those islands there near South Korea that could lead to a tit-for-tat response and really see things escalate on the peninsula. Kate?
This is just the latest in a string of threats, as you well know and you've talked about. Chris Lawrence, thanks so much at the Pentagon for us this evening. Let's dig deeper on this now with the veteran diplomatic troubleshooter, former New Mexico governor and UN ambassador Bill Richardson. Don't need to remind our viewers, Governor, but you have been to North Korea a number of times and most recently just in January. Thanks so much for coming in. I mean, this is a very big deal, to say the least. I mean, the Pentagon says that they are taking this very seriously. How seriously do you take this latest threat from North Korea?
Well, I take it very seriously, mainly, Kate, because of the uncertainty in the leadership in North Korea. Nobody knows who's calling the shots. Nobody knows whether the hardliners have won over, I think, the mind of Kim Jong-un. I think that is the case. Those that want further provocations, want escalation. The danger, though, is not an attack on the United States, although I think it makes sense for the Pentagon and the Defense Secretary ordering the interceptors for missiles away from Russia and for North Korea. I think that makes sense. But mainly here, what we don't want to see is another shelling, another attack, another tit-for-tat between North and South Korea. We have close to 30,000 troops there. The place is a tinderbox. But what we're really most uncertain about is who's calling these shots. They've always blustered a lot, the North Koreans. They always talk about the intensity of the ferocity of their forces and anti-U.S. But I think our main enemy here is the uncertainty of what's happening there.
And it sure seems, I mean, it's impossible, as Chris Lawrence was pointing out, the human intelligence factor is so lacking when it comes to North Korea that it's impossible to get into the mind of the North Korean leaders. But when you try to, you've been there, you've seen how North Korea works, you've been there more than most. talk to me about what you think could be the motivation here. How much do you think domestic politics is at play to try to prop up this new leader, Kim Jong-un, or does it have more to do with new leadership in South Korea?
I think it's a combination. The new leader of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, does want to buttress his base. I think he's sensitive to the fact that he's so young. He hasn't been in the military. He wants to get the support of the military, of the domestic communist cadre. Apparently his family, he's got a very powerful uncle that is antagonistic to the United States, to South Korea. I don't think the motivation is South Korea. In fact, the new South Korean president, she sent mixed signals, but I think she would be ready for a dialogue. So what is happening? I think the military leadership, the hardliners, have overtaken the more moderates in the North Korean foreign ministry, people that I deal with. And then it could be that the new young leader is not playing. He's absent. He's trying to buttress his domestic base. You know, a lot of observers that speculate don't really know the reality. I've been there a lot of times and things change, but one thing you want to be sure about North Korea, it's unpredictable. You don't know for certainty what's happening, but I think the best thing to do is be prepared. But I think eventually, Kate, we're going to have a dialogue and a discussion with the North Koreans, either the United States or the South Koreans or the six-party countries, because you don't want a country with nuclear weapons, with all of these missiles, with this uncertain leadership, with American troops there, and we have so many interests in Asia. You know, China should step up and help us a little bit.
Well, with all
and it
of this
seems
in
that they're
mind,
only willing to...
With all of this in mind, Governor, I mean, when you take how many interests are in that region, how many U.S. interests are in that region, how little we know about this country. What more can the U.S. do? We talk about this every time another threat pops up. We already have sanctions upon sanctions against this country. What more can the U.S. do? Well, one big dimension here is China. Now, the good news is that China did help us draft some very new tough sanctions at the UN, which I think made sense. But then China has now stepped back a little bit and said, well, these military maneuvers between the U.S. and South Korea are not good. So they're sending mixed messages. I think what also needs to happen is, I've always known the North Koreans, they want to deal with the U.S. They think they're a similar huge power. And while I think our policy makes sense, the sanctions, the response to their underground testing and their missiles, I think eventually there's going to have to be some diplomacy, some creative way in which the six-party countries, China, South Korea, Japan, the U.S., Russia, engage this new regime. I don't see any other way. Yeah. Well, Governor Richardson, it seems in the absence of that, you are at least trying. Let's put it that way. Governor, it's great to see you. Thanks so much. It's always great to have your thoughts. Talk to you soon. Thank you. So what do North Koreans do when they're not marching or aiming missiles or threatening to aim missiles? Here are some surprising images of daily life.